Welcome to the space between heaven on earth. This is a companion podcast to Awakening Heaven on Earth, created as a space for reflection, conversation, and lived experience. Here, we enter the pause between knowing and becoming, between insight and embodiment, between heaven and earth. These conversations are not about answers or conclusions. They are about presence, about listening, about reasoning together, about meeting one another honestly in the unfolding journey of awakening. I'm your host, Jeffrey Aylor. Again, welcome and thank you for entering the space between with us. Welcome to this episode of The Space Between. In our last episode, we explored what it means to heal division in the world around us. We talked about unity in action and how our daily choices contribute either to connection or separation. But today we bring that conversation home, literally home. This episode is called Healing the Family, the First Circle of Love. Because before we learned anything about politics, anything about religion, before culture, before being exposed to society, we learned relationship through family. And many of us, family became our first experience of both love and pain. So today we're going to explore, what does healing look like within families? And how can we move toward greater understanding and compassion and connection? So I want to welcome this morning, we have Purna Devi is with us again this morning. We have Dermody and Sherri Keys joining us for this great conversation. And as always, welcome to each of you, and how much I greatly appreciate every time we have a chance to get together and share our experiences and thoughts around some of these interesting topics. It's been a joy. And this one we're going to do very similar as we have the last several conversations, where we're going to approach this in different sections. And today, the first section of our questions and thought are going to be centered around family as our first teacher. You think about the fact that psychology teaches that most of us are pretty much hardwired within the first 7 years of our experience. And most of that is before we even get into public education or other education. And the family is the primary source of most of that wiring that we get, that foundation that we get established. So with that, our first question is, what are some of the greatest gifts your family gave you? And we'll start with Purna.
Well, what a loaded question, right? Greatest gifts. You know, when you ask me these questions, Jeff, I tend to turn them inside out. And so oftentimes our greatest gifts, our greatest teachings are the most painful ones, right? Sometimes we think our gifts feel good, right? And I believe that through my own lived experience, a lot of the gifts I received through my lineage, through my ancestry, have been teachings of how not to parent, of how not to show up. You know, we'll get to forgiveness later, but I grew up in a really volatile home, and our family is our connection to belonging, to safety, to co-regulation, and to boundaries, all of these things. And so when you don't have that growing up, we can either continue to perpetuate that and live through that wound, and those survival patterns that we've developed. Or, and oftentimes it's and, we will do that until we do our healing journey and our healing work to then begin to develop what we didn't have growing up. So I think a lot of my gifts stem from the painful lessons I received through my family.
I was fortunate growing up that I had kind of two families. And again, that resulted in an early divorce that my parents had. So my parents got divorced when I was somewhere 2 or 3. And through that, I gained a stepfather, and I still was able to retain the Dermody side of my family and a good relationship with my biological father. And it's been fantastic. So through that extended family, I was still able to I had so much love growing up, and I'm very fortunate for that. I have more siblings due to that. I have a incredible amount of cousins, extended family. So I gained the gift of love. I gained the gift of understanding and forgiveness and learning a lot about relationships as I've grown up and found out what happened with those, why the split happened. And so I've gained a lot through my family of how not to do some things, how to do others. So I've learned a lot of what I know now through my family. So it is a lot packed into one question. So I'll just leave it at that.
I guess for me, I've learned growing up the importance of unconditional love. I think I've shared this with this team before, just watching specifically how my mom would give love just blindly. There would always say that it's like there's no stranger. Family was very important to her. How she loved us and her siblings, and was extremely important. And you could see that, and it's made the journey for me as I'm transitioning to this kind of figure that's kind of more of a matriarch to some levels, never at the level that I think could ever attain that my mom showed growing up. But it was like, it's watching that was very important to me. And then, watching the extended parts of the family was very insightful as well, because it allowed me to gain knowledge and grow and live through experiences that I saw in others. They're good things, the things that maybe they wish they have done a little differently, but I think it's really formed me into who I am. I truly believe that family is we're born into this for a reason. It can't like divorce it. So you're gonna learn from it, and you're gonna grow with it. And so that's kind of my takeaway.
Well, certainly family is, to me, it's a wonderful laboratory. And the gifts that I've received have been, experiences of both positive and negative, how to respond, how not to respond. I certainly have experienced love. I can't say all the love's unconditional, because I think in most cases, quite honestly, most people's love is quite conditional. And it's interesting, too, that as I have aged, some of those gifts have come out through looking back at experiences and seeing them differently than when I actually was experiencing it. I go back and I look at that and I rethink it, given my knowledge now and information I gained, and still continue to learn, both good and bad. I have to say, my parents, I'm one of the few people, I had parents that truly did love each other, and they were both married before. So I have, stepbrothers and sisters, much like everybody often will share stories about that. And that whole family dynamic creates a different feel, believe it or not, because I do think, again, I found that my parents showed favoritism towards my sister and I, who were their natural children, over my stepbrothers and sisters. Right, wrong, or indifferent. They did. That's just things that happened. And I look back at that now, and I don't say I feel guilty, but I see it. And it taught me a lot about how life sometimes isn't fair. Right. And you have to go through a lot of these experiences sometimes to see that. But all those are gifts, because every time we learn, every lesson we learn is a gift. And that's what we're here for. That's my belief, is that that's what this lifetime is all about. So, goodness, just this one question, we could spend the entire time just unpacking it. But as we think about this, what are some of the specific lessons about love, belonging, and relationship? What really jumps out at you when you think about big lessons of love, belonging, and relationship that you learned growing up?
One thing I learned was, and again, I'm going to take the inverted approach, was about conflict resolution. Growing up, that didn't exist in my household. There was no such thing as healthy conflict, as folks that came together and shared conflicting viewpoints. Because let's be honest, relationships are hard, and to have a healthy relationship, it doesn't mean that it's conflict free. And so I think, early dynamics of family should help us learn how to resolve conflict and stay in unity with oneself and each other. So I did not have that blueprint growing up. And that affected me a great deal, stumbling forward through my relationships. And now it's something that I practice with my own son, and we resolve conflict in such a healthy way. And again, invertedly, I'm thankful that I saw the contrast so explicitly, that conflict resolution is such an important dynamic in my relationship and my family now.
Well, I often say the hardest lessons are some of the best lessons. The most difficult experiences, the most painful things, give us some of the greatest learning. And to be able to transmute that and alchemize those experiences and turn that lead into gold is really, not everybody can do that, Purna.
It's difficult.
This is why people seek counseling and have many issues because they struggle with the transmutation of that experience into something and turning it into something that can be even positive. So,
yeah. And I do want to tack on, because I don't want this to be just a trauma dump on my family episode, that I did learn a great deal about work ethic. My parents came from nothing. They are incredibly hard workers. My father, an entrepreneur who came from the holler in Kentucky, dirt poor, one of the only to complete high school, right? And to have a high school education in his family. And the work ethic I have today, right? The business I've built from nothing, I really thank my father and witnessing how he really just came from nothing and made quite a successful business for himself. So there are some good things as well, for sure, that I've learned.
So I have two that are just huge to me, and one is I didn't jump into marriage and a real strong relationship until I was a little bit older. So my parents got married when they were very young. My mom was pregnant with me in high school, and they got married right after she got out of high school, I believe. My dad was in the Navy. So I waited until I was almost 30, right around 30, till I got married. And I think that was because of that, learning her situation. And I didn't want I wanted to get married once. I know everybody wants to get married only once, right? That's the whole thinking behind everything. Initially, you don't go into a relationship thinking, well, this is going to be a short one, and then we'll try again on the second. That's never anybody's initial thought, I'm pretty sure. So that was one of the big lessons, was I wanted to wait. I wanted to find the right person, and I took a little longer than most people. Then the second one was the ability of my stepdad to bring me in and treat me as his own from the beginning. And it is amazing. I don't feel any different at all than my half brother, right? He was able to bring me in, and he is my dad, right? I mean, and that happens, I think, also because I was so young when he came into my life, but still, his ability to love me unconditionally, just like his own, has been an amazing gift to me. And so much respect and love for him right back. So I think the ability to find that love for somebody has transferred over. And I can see that in me as well, as I look back and reflect, and what a great gift he has imparted upon me. So yeah, I'd say those are the two biggest things I can see about the lessons that they've given to me.
For me, I guess there's a lot, but I'm just going to home in on a couple. I think just starting with the fact that based off the times, growing up during the time that my parents were living and raising a family, times were different, a little harder. Both my parents worked in manufacturing, actually, and back then times were good and times were bad. But as kids, you never knew it or felt it or understood it. But they would always make a way, and they would always instill, in my brother and myself, like, you work hard, you're gonna, you excel, you'll do great things. Always wanting to make sure we had more, positioned more to have what they had, was huge. And I'm actually the first undergraduate in my family at that time frame, and the first graduate with a master's degree as well. And I like to think that the hard work and focus that was instilled in me helped me build a footprint that other people in my family were able to kind of follow as well. So that instillment of hard work, you can be anything that you want to be if you put yourself, your mind, and your heart in it, was impactful for me. And I think the other piece is just the ability, which I think, is still something that we all like continue to grow in that space, being able to forgive, just understanding that, there's something bigger and it's hard, but just being able to look inside ourselves and humble ourselves enough, I think, to forgive the things that really won't matter and work on forgiveness of things that are larger, because I think that's how we learn to get through conflict, and we learn to our way to figure out, how do you love in a way that's very unconditional.
Well, for me, I learned that opposites do attract. My parents probably couldn't be more different from each other. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, which for me was a great blessing. She was an anchor. My father worked shift work at in a steel mill, so there were a lot of times he wouldn't be present because he was working. I can always remember, these are such fond memories for me, that when my father would be working a 3 to 11 shift, 3 in the afternoon to 11 at night, my mom would put us to bed. And then when my dad got home, she would wake us up and we would go have dinner somewhere before. And then we would come back and then he would go to bed because he'd have to sleep. And then when he worked a midnight shift, a lot of times before he would go to bed and get rest, we would go have a breakfast somewhere or as a family so that we could have that family time. And it really stuck with me. My dad always told me, you don't have to love what you do. This was his lesson to me. You don't have to love what you do. Your job is to provide for your family and work hard. It goes back to Purna, what you talk about, that work ethic. And he worked very hard and provided well without an education beyond high school, and instilled in us a love for learning. He reads the dictionary for fun. So it did instill in us a desire and a love for learning and travel. So, but what I also saw in their relationships, my parents were both spouse centered. If you understand what I mean by that, their whole sense of worth and value was centered in each other. And in many ways, I think that was good. But then again, there's other aspects of that I find that probably aren't good or healthy, because it goes back to what we were talking about with the masculine and the feminine. They completed each other, but neither one of them were able to become complete individually because of that. And when my mother passed away, it becomes very obvious that, my dad's world just shattered, because he didn't have a number of other relationships for himself that he could rely on to get him through and deal with that grief. Even to this day, he still, and honestly, I think, he's learning himself that, he's created his situation. We create our reality through our beliefs and through our, so, I have learned a lot about, again, love is it's a word people use, but I don't think they really think about it sometimes, about what that really means. And I hear people talk about unconditional love, but I see very little love that's actually unconditional. And that's probably one of the greatest things for me to grow and develop, is to really learn to see beyond and not treat people differently because of what I see with my eyes. So, my goodness, we can just, again, this is what I love about this topic. We know our family experiences continue to influence us as we've become adults. All of us here are adults. And whether those experiences were joyful or whether they were difficult or somewhere in between, we know that they often shape the way we see, the lens through which we see ourselves and other people. So as we go into this next set of questions, it's really going to be centered around family wounds and generational patterns, because I do believe many of the things that we see and experience with our family are generational. It's handed down from generation to generation. So what are some of the ways pain or unresolved patterns within your family, how can those things be passed from one generation to the next?
Well, I think a lot of the patterns that we learn when we're younger, they repeat, right? And so, again, if my family is my blueprint for conflict resolution, for safety, for boundaries, for communication, for trust, for love, for security, all of these really fundamental principles that humans need to become healthy, whole individuals, right? These are basic fundamental needs, in addition to housing and food. So we could go into, right, the diets passed down and all of these different ways in which our familial lineage creates normalcy. I come from again, this Appalachian family, right? They're hard workers, and also physical, mental health were not priorities ever, right? These are struggling Appalachian folks that are working from morning to night, but their dental care was not the top priority. What they're eating was not the top priority. And how they're, again, showing up in conflict resolution or in their mental health was not their priority. And so while many of my past generations were focused on survival and also interwoven with incredibly toxic patriarchal behaviors, toxic masculine behaviors, a great deal of diminishing of the feminine. I find it extraordinary that I am now living beyond those generational wounds and those patterns. And it's because of that lineage where I saw the women, strong women, beaten and harmed and oppressed by their male partners. And again, just everyone trying to survive. I just feel quite extraordinary to be, I feel such a rebel, and it heals generations past. My ancestors, I feel, are rooting me on. It makes me emotional to think about how they have their hands on my back saying, "Go, girl," and how I have changed and disrupted those ancestral traumas and transmuted, like you said, a lot of that so that, my son can see something different in the generations beyond me. I'll be the ancestor that they said, wow, look at her, right? What a fiery force of disruption she was.
It's interesting because my family is from Eastern Kentucky, but they're from the northern part of Eastern Kentucky, which to them was the big city. So Ashland, Kentucky was the big city for
Right.
people who grew up in other parts of that Appalachian area of Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia. And, I think of the book, The Hillbilly Elegy, if you've read that,
Yeah.
right? And the culture is so strong.
Yeah.
And our son, Joel, who is not with us today, but has been on the podcast so many times, his first marriage was to a girl who grew up in Pikeville, Kentucky. Right. So that whole area, family lived in a holler. The whole family lived in one holler. Drove down a lane, and it was, sister, mother, brother, aunt, uncle. They were coal miners, most of them by trade. And the culture there was so incredibly strong. They're very different. And you can see it because they live in they had their own little world. But their philosophy, you're either a Christian or a drug addict. That's what they would say. family, they're either a Christian or a drug addict. And then in many cases, they were both. They were Christian drug addicts. But to break that chain, so what we're going to get into eventually is chain breaking, which is what you're doing. You're breaking a chain of cultural learning that's handed down and taught from generation to generation. This is how you treat women. This is how men are. This is what and it's based on this Christian belief that we have about, well, that same concept exists in Muslim countries. Let me tell you, women are oppressed. Women are downtrodden. Men treat them with that exact same mentality, right? And it's cultural, generational. I think of Anita Moorjani, if you're not familiar with her. Wonderful story. She was Indian descent. Parents were Indian, Hindu, grew up in Hong Kong, and went to Catholic schools. So you talk about a crazy background she had as far as being raised, but the influence her father had on her because of that patriarchal, basic Hindu patriarchal society, the way women are treated, she dealt with so much guilt and so much shame because she was resisting those cultural expectations and she ended up having cancer because her body started manifesting the guilt and the shame. And she had a near-death experience. And in that near-death experience, this was the beautiful lesson, is one of the first people she experienced was her father, who in the astral world said, "Oh, honey, I am so sorry. I love you unconditionally. And go and be and do and become everything you want." And that, again, this is the hard part about looking beyond what we're experiencing here in this aspect of life, knowing that there's the root of their being is still perfect. And you're going to experience that. We all experience that. So she ended up, after her near-death experience, she was on her deathbed, came back, and within 2 weeks, her cancer was gone. And now she's out teaching the world these things. And it's just one of those miraculous healings and stories, but she's a chain breaker. And it just, to me, I just think that's a beautiful. So anyone who hasn't read or heard anything from Anita Moorjani, I definitely recommend you spend some time with her, because she like you and others, because unfortunately you're not alone.
Of course.
Right? You think about how many people are experiencing that.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting here thinking as you guys are talking, first of all, great books by Anita. So I got to experience those too. But as I'm sitting here thinking, first off, I don't know a lot about I know some, but not a lot about my family history. And from generation to generation, I know a little bit, but not a whole lot. I didn't get to know my grandparents very well on either side. I was very fortunate to get to know my great-grandparents from my stepdad, which is a gift, a great gift that I got to sit down and talk with them. But I'm sitting here thinking about the nature and nurture aspect of development, and the family's kind of the place where you get both. You get the nature side, and with what's passed down to you, you get the nurture side from what's taught to you, and you're getting both from your family, and it's kind of the commingling of both. And it's that opportunity to learn from your family, and sometimes it's not always the correct lessons that you're getting. And in my aspect, from myself, I was always taught that, well, you've got the Dermody knees. They're always going to be a problem for you. They're always going to pain you, especially as you get older. It starts when you're young. You play sports, they're really bad. And then as you get older, they're just going to get worse and worse. So I grew up with that, thinking that. And as I wrestled in high school, I played football, I was a catcher, right? All of these different things that were just going to be horrible for my knees. And after halftime or the middle of the game and everything that I played, my knees would start to hurt because this is what was ingrained in me growing up. And then as I got a little bit older, my knees were always hurting. It's funny because now I'm turning 50 this year. My knees no longer hurt. I have uncles now that have the Dermody knees, and they are hobbling all over the place. And my knees don't hurt.
They're like seeds that get planted.
Absolutely.
In your mind, right? And then you start creating that reality.
That's right. You just grow. They just grow and grow and grow. And I think that's one of the things that I wish people would learn from early on is you don't have to let every seed that's planted grow or grow into what everybody thinks they need to grow into.
Well,
right?
We get
you
weeds.
have some control. That's right. Pluck the weeds, let the flowers grow. Right.
Yeah.
And I am grateful that those weeds no longer grow.
But you've got to tend to the garden, right? That's
absolutely
work.
Yes.
And anybody who's ever gardened, and I love gardening as a metaphor, and that's why it's used throughout all the sacred traditions, is, God is wonderful in creation, but without us helping weed the garden, so it's a co-creation. You've got to put in the effort to tend the soil and weed and aerate and make sure that you're feeding. And so that work. This is one of the things I'm hoping our nonprofit will be able to help with, and that's get people back into gardening. Get them back get their hands in the dirt, get your feet into the dirt, ground them, help them learn and realize that the effort it takes to grow natural things is the same effort it's going to take spiritually to weed your heart. Your heart is the garden. And how do you tend it? Right.
Well, and then one more thing, because I just realized as you were talking there that generationally, and normally sometimes it skips generations, you will realize that you have a gardener in your family that typically is the person that keeps everyone together. And for me, that was like my grandmother, who I didn't get to know very well, but because she is that gardener, not necessarily out in the yard gardening, she's a family gardener, and she is that person that helps everybody get along, cope, and keep everyone together.
They're like a facilitator. Sherri,
it's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So as Sherri, I'm sure, comes on here and shares her experience, that's what she feels. That's what her mother was doing.
Right.
Was being that facilitator of love and family and uniting and glue, the glue that holds.
Yeah.
Now that's a lot of work.
It is, but it's so fun now, because now I'm going to be thinking of that person forever now as the gardener of the family, right? The one that is tending those weeds and helping everybody as a family stay together, right? I think that's a beautiful image. I think that's great. So thanks for that, Jeff. That's wonderful.
Well, I have to say, one gardener can feed many people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
One person working hard in a garden can create a lot more food than they themselves can consume. They have to share it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're here to do, is be gardeners of unity, gardeners of love, gardeners of wisdom, gardeners of, and to share that and to feed and allow people, right? And then maybe they become a gardener. Not everybody's going to be a gardener.
Well, even a fledgling gardener, right? Somebody that's just learning how to tend to those simple weeds can help tremendously, right? In a family and an environment. Yeah.
Well, it's a gift. It's a gift.
It
so
is.
like as a chef cooking, not everybody enjoys cooking. I do. And one meal feeds multiple people. And it's a joy to share that. A joy to share that.
Yeah.
And it's the same with this. To me, we're just fixing a dish here. And it's all beautiful, and all these different ingredients come together and make one beautiful thing that we can share with the listeners. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm going to keep that term gardener near and dear. I think that's a great way to kind of explain it. I guess for me, just going back, I didn't know my mom's mom died when she was like 15. Um, she died of like things that in today's world there we had cured, like blood pressure, things like that. She worked extremely hard. But on her deathbed, my understanding from my mom was, I need you to leave down south and I need you to come to Ohio because I think you'll have a better opportunity. And so, very young after high school graduation, my mom graduated early from high school. Actually 15. She came to Ohio and just, in there was a little family here, but just, growing up and in the absence of a person that, was very strong. My granddad stayed there um, because she had a younger brother, but she followed her mom's wishes and you need to do this. And she did it and worked hard to have a better life for herself, her and her husband, my dad, the family, my brother and I. And I feel like it was that foundation. I mean, she would always tell me that her card. So this chain that I started with my grandmother to my mother and now me is very important because I remember always looking at my two daughters and like, I'm going to be the best that God will allow me to be for you. The best example that I can do. And I really feel like that allowed me, to impact them in a way that I hope and I feel, at least what I see, has been very positive. Just the teachings and the instilling in them that no matter what the obstacles are presented to you, you can do better. You will, I will give you the best I can give you with hopes that you will be in a position in your life to uplift people, family, and give the best that you can give. And I really feel like I had some impact in doing that because it was instilled in me from my mom, and I only can imagine that um, it happened, you know, in prior generations. So that part of it, I think, is just, yeah, it's huge for me.
well, you and your family, Sherri, honestly, carry a challenge and a burden, African American, right? And you've had to deal with things that are very different as a family. And how has you think back, how did your mother equip you and help you? And what generational issues did you have to overcome, to get to where you are today?
I mean, a lot, and even in the footprint of my generation, even raising kids, there were some complexities. But I think, hopefully, I navigated through those as I was raising them based off of just going through my own life scenarios and just having a mom as that, you know, figure to kind of, continue to allow me to know and be strong in my own skin, if that makes sense. Um, it truly has, it truly has molded me into who I am. Um, and I think it really makes it easy to have unconditional love when you've gone through journeys where, sorry, um, where you not always felt like you got it back.
Well, you're a wonderful example, and which is why we love you and love you here and love you being a part of this conversation. It's so important. Your perspective is so important, and your experience is so important. And we all know that there are not only issues and pressures that occur within the family that make things difficult, but when you have that and you have the external things pushing on you and your family that you, in many cases, don't have any control over. Learning to deal with that, learning to live and learning to grow and prosper in what would be considered, in my opinion, unfair circumstances is a testament. It's a testament to you. It's a testament to your family and your mother and your father and the generations that have molded them at the same time.
No, I was going to say I appreciate that. Sorry for the gap there in responding, but yeah, I think it's a journey, and we're still learning. But all of us, everyone, and I think it definitely is something that hopefully one day, and we're getting there, that we can start breaking chains, right? And just, because I think that's the plan, like,
Oh my goodness. That to
yeah.
me, if we can help one person listening take from this conversation and gain the strength to break a chain of unhealthy generational conditioning, then this is all worthwhile. I had someone yesterday, we were talking about the work I'm doing, the podcast, all the things we're doing here, and said, well, how are you promoting it? I said, I'm not. It's not my job to promote this. It's my job to create, and the universe will promote it because it's there. It's the universe. It's God's work. And if one person benefits, perfect. I feel satisfied that this is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So we know that, what's the role of awareness in all this? What role does that awareness play in breaking generational cycles? So Purna, I really specifically want to ask you this. In your healing work, do you find that many people are carrying these generational family wounds and they don't recognize it? They don't even realize that they're doing this.
Absolutely. I think folks oftentimes will come in thinking that they're going to talk about a certain present day issue in their life. And that doesn't mean they aren't experiencing symptoms in their present day relationships or in their mind or in their body, right? Or in their emotional state. It quickly becomes apparent, though, as we trace the origins of this modern day struggle. We trace it typically back to our childhood development and our family of origin. And I think that healing truly involves us becoming conscious of those things that we've experienced as automatic or fundamental, or that we have taken on as our personality consciousness or identity, or that's just the way it's always been, or that's the way my family is, or that's just who I am. And those sorts of expressions can keep us from digging deeper into why and how those ways of being that are perpetuating our suffering have actually developed. So that a lot of my work, whether they intend it initially or not, tends to go back to childhood work.
In the continuous improvement work that Joe and Sherri and I do, one of the things we teach is that it's easier to deal with a problem the closer you are to when the problem gets created.
Absolutely.
So solving a problem within a system at the front, at the beginning, and not then allowing that problem to ripple throughout the rest of the system, all the damage it does is it flows through. You want to go back to, so again, this gets back to, I would really love in some way to ultimately be able to influence the way we educate children and the way we work with children. First of all, I've come to the conclusion, and I got this concept from Neil Donald Walsh and the Conversations with God books. And if you're not familiar with those, I highly recommend them. But in there, in his conversation with God, God says, just because you can have children does not mean you should raise children. And I firmly believe that in many cases, there are people who they can have a child, but they're not really capable of raising a child. And we wound and we hurt children in so many ways. And if we could help them when they're young and help them identify some of the things when they're young, think about how much you're preventing in the future and not letting those issues fester over years and years and years, right?
In yoga, there is something called samskaras. Samskaras are deeply conditioned impressions that over time, those grooves, and if we're taking that perspective of neuroscience, right? They used to believe that we developed a pattern or a way of thinking and the brain was like concrete and it just was stuck there. And we understand the neuroplasticity of how the brain works. And these samskaras, these literal grooves, come from patterns and habitual behaviors. And the more we do them, the deeper that groove is created. And the more positive effort then it's going to take to smoothen that groove over, or to, I think of it like the Grand Canyon. How much dirt do I have to throw into the Grand Canyon before it becomes level? And some of us have generational Grand Canyons of developmental behaviors, right? And so, like you said, the earlier we can catch these things, the more shallow those grooves are going to be to heal later.
Right. The probability of resolving issues. Paramahansa Yogananda touched on samskaras quite a bit in his teachings, his reading, his writings. And he would talk about it like a skier. When people are skiing, their skis get into grooves, and it's really difficult for them to get up out of that groove. And even when they do, for a time, a lot of times the skis will find their way back into the grooves. Right. It's almost like a magnet. These grooves can pull you back. They're so strong. The influence of those grooves is so strong.
And it's rooted to our survival patterns. And so my system believes it's keeping me safe. And maybe at one time it did. And I think part of this healing work as adults, right, is to recognize that, wait, that pattern that was developed that was once keeping me safe is no longer keeping me safe. Now it's limiting and harming me.
Well, in my studies and my experience, I've often wondered, why do people, and often an abuser was typically abused. Again, it tends to be generational. They learn this and they think that's normal behavior, because that's what happened with them. They think that's how a man should treat a woman, or a woman should treat a child, or a man. And then you look at the people that are experiencing abuse and you say, why do they stay? Even though they recognize it, and even though they can see it and they feel it, they know it's not right, they stay. Again, it's the power of the pull of that groove because it's familiar,
That's it.
right? They'd rather stay with what they know, even the devil they know. So that brings us then into what I think is probably the most important element of this conversation, and that is forgiveness and understanding. And family healing often brings us right face to face with forgiveness. Not necessarily excusing, it's not excusing, but it's understanding, acknowledging the reality, and then figuring out how to move forward in a positive or a constructive way. So, what does forgiveness mean to you? What's it mean to you? It's like love. It's a word that gets thrown around all the time. But what's it really mean to you?
I tend to think about and talk about in my sessions about forgiveness as a side effect of becoming whole, as a side effect of compassion. So many people will say, well, you should just forgive if it were that easy. Right? But it really isn't that easy. And so I think it's a symptom of us beginning to heal our inner world. And I think forgiveness is also related to boundaries. I doesn't mean I'm bypassing what happened, and it doesn't mean I'm accepting, but I'm no longer self-abandoning. I'm no longer allowing what this person did to define the way I live. And sometimes that means I'm not in relationship with them. Sometimes that means I set a boundary. Sometimes it means that I'm not in relationship because I can no longer tolerate, right? Because I'm giving to myself in a way where I am loving and compassionate and working on wholeness within. And so my inner world is now established in a way that I'm recognizing what I can tolerate and not tolerate. And so I think sometimes reconciliation isn't required for forgiveness. Sometimes the other person isn't required for forgiveness. You know, I sat in years with my mother. I brought her to therapy time and time again, and all I wanted to be was heard and understood, and that never happened. So part of me, I think, in my forgiveness work was accepting also reality on reality's terms that my mother was never going to show up in that forgiveness dynamic in the way that I was seeking. So then I had to do the work of deep inner acceptance, which led to me forgiving her and having compassion for, again, her own ancestral traumas, for the way she grew up, for the level of emotional development where she is, right? So I think it's a lot of acceptance.
So when, in order to forgive someone, I think that you are experiencing pain or hurt of some sort, right? I think so. I think the power to forgive, the ability to forgive, I think it is the intentional process to allow that to the intentional process to get rid of that pain, that hurt, to let it go. And that's not easy. And you had to realize, I think, that what is causing that pain, that hurt, that want of revenge, right? That power that it held over you, and then to intentionally say, it's no longer going to have that power over me. I think that is what forgiveness means to me.
Well, you're using again alchemical terms,
Right.
right? Yeah, you have a pain.
Mm-hmm.
How do you transmute that? Right?
Yeah.
Who has the pain? You or the person that you're pained by?
It's you. It
Okay.
is 100% you.
So how many times does the person that you need to forgive not even know that you have a problem or a pain with them? They don't even know you need to forgive them in some cases, because they don't know that there's anything wrong from their perspective.
Right.
So I always have to ask, who is forgiveness for? Who's forgiveness for? Is it for them or is it for you? We fail to give it because we think we're giving it to someone, and the reality is it's not for them.
Mm-mm.
It's totally an internal transmutation. It's not being bound. It's not letting it control. It's not giving over to it, because when you give over to it, it now has influence and control on you. You're freeing yourself through forgiveness. You're not forgetting. That's the other thing I think is so important. We don't forget.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to transmute that. I always say, being bitter against someone is like taking poison and hoping they die from it. Well,
yeah.
Okay. These bitter pills, these are some bitter pills. Yeah. So
it's also not saying, what happened was okay, because it's not okay.
No.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
It's very complex, because a lot of times the person that you need to forgive doesn't know in their heart or mind that what they did is not okay.
Right.
Or they wouldn't have done it.
Mm-hmm. And in the same aspect, though, you can't let it keep happening either, though, because then it's.
But that gets back to Purna's point of,
mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean that you're going to be now spending all your time with that person and that everything
mm-hmm.
is okay. No.
Right.
There have to be boundaries. There has to
mm-hmm.
potentially be, it could be separation.
Mm-hmm.
For
Right.
the sake of safety and protection.
Right. Exactly.
Sherri, I know that you don't have anybody.
Oh my gosh. I've been on this earth quite a many years. It's all a journey. So I go back to saying, like, forgive is not to forget. So I'm not going to forget the pain. But I do feel like that being in a place where you can forgive is part of that, one of those steps toward unconditional love that you might have for yourself, for your family, for something else. But you're able to rationalize within your heart, within how you feel, the disappointment or anger. And sometimes people don't even care whether you forgive them or not. So it's either they're not aware, and maybe they're aware, they just don't care. And there are a broad sense of circumstances that probably encompass all of that. But I think none of it really matters, because, to your point, Jeff, forgiveness starts within you. It's something that you need in order to heal, to move on. And that forgiveness gives you the opening to be able to move forward in life, for yourself, for maybe the benefit of family and others, in a way that, could, continue change, or whatever we want to call that. But I think it is an element of representing unconditional love. Again, that's how I look at it. It's forgiveness is hard. It is, but and people sometimes never get healed with that. But maybe the thing is that I can forgive and still have this memory, because the memory is not going to go away. But the memory is important because it teaches us something. It's a lesson that we needed to move forward in life.
I firmly believe that this is why there is so much sickness in the world. Physical illness and sickness in the world. It's people harboring bitterness. Bitterness is poison. and it manifests in our physical bodies when we hold it inside. So one of my favorite studies that I've done is from a book called A Course in Miracles. So anyone who has ever been exposed to that, which is actually, it's so interesting because I so enjoyed A Course in Miracles that I bought a bunch of the books and gave them away to people. And I actually had a dear friend, and I think I talked about this on one of the podcasts. I gave it to them, and they're Christian people, and they felt so uncomfortable, like it was the devil, because it wasn't the Bible. And okay, well, let me tell you what the foundation of A Course in Miracles is. Choose love over fear every day. And forgiveness is love in action. Forgive. Because forgiveness is what brings about the miracles. It's what brings about healing. It's what brings about the not just physical healing, but emotional and spiritual healing. This is the whole message Jesus came to share, was choose love over fear and forgive and watch the miracles happen. Watch them happen. I don't know about you, but I think that's beautiful.
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. 100%. Very much in line. And that it's interesting to me because I know people that will not let it go. I mean, the people that they're upset with are not even on this earth anymore. And they're still mad about it. And it's the, you're not going to receive your blessings. You're not going to be able to heal yourself. You've got that person's off to, God has taken them to another place on in this world. Because I believe there's multiple worlds. Why are you still on earth right now, holding anger in your heart for something that happened 100,000 years ago and can never be rectified, not in the way in which you're going to be content with? So you need to move on so that you can get your blessings.
Right? The Christian scriptures call those roots of bitterness. Roots of bitterness.
But it impacts their life to a point where they
can't have joy.
Yeah, they can't enjoy.
They can't have peace.
Yep.
They can't experience it.
Yep. It's not good.
So again, Purna, how do we hold compassion for these family members and still honor healthy boundaries?
Well, I think, again, it's rooted in everyone not abandoning themselves, right? I think compassion without boundaries is self-abandonment. And so the more we can do the work, I think, to, it's interesting. My family lineage, I come from a very long line of bitter women. My mother and my grandmother can recount the stories like Sherri was talking about of people that have done them wrong for years and years. And my grandmother actually is passed away, but she had what they call in layman's terms, broken heart syndrome. Part of her heart was literally calcified, was literally hardened. And I just think about how sad that is, right? Like we've been saying, it literally manifests. And so first, I think we have to realize what's important, right? Can we hold non-judgmental space? You all know I've been going through it. And, we don't need to get into the specifics, but the less judgmental I am of myself and of others, the more gracefully I can forgive in the moment when someone is harming me. I don't have to always understand why or how or what, but because I love myself, because I have not abandoned myself in the darkest places, I can hold myself with love and compassion. Therefore, I can extend that love and compassion to people that we might look at and say they don't deserve forgiveness. Well, who am I to judge who deserves forgiveness or not. And I think the Divine Mother, right? That essence of the divine loving mother, we're all children in her lap, regardless of what we've done. And so I always utilize that vision, not of the hardened hearted grandmother, but rather that compassionate, gracious, graceful, divine mother, where it doesn't matter what you've done, you deserve forgiveness and compassion and a space of non-judgment and unconditional love, like Sherri's been talking about.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I'm going to absolutely flip this conversation on its head.
Beautiful.
Because I have come to believe, and you can agree or disagree with me, that in the past, I always felt like, well, I didn't get to choose my family. I didn't get to choose my parents. I didn't get to choose what country I was born into. I didn't get to choose the socioeconomic experience that I might have. I didn't get to choose that. Well, if I don't get to choose, if I'm not involved in that process, then I'm a victim. Well, I've come to understand that I believe we do choose what experiences we're going to come into this life and have. I think we do choose as a soul and make contract before we enter this earth plane. Each time, because I don't think we do it one time. I think we do it many, 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 many times. I have come to understand that I did choose. I did choose the parents I wanted to be raised by. I did choose where I wanted to be raised geographically. I did choose. I chose my family, and I chose them because I needed to have experiences with them and through them, because we are a soul family. More than likely, we've come through multiple lifetimes together with each other. And I could have been the parent, and I could have been the mother, and I could have been and it's this, because it's all about evolution. It's all about evolving and growing into oneness and unity with the divine. All of it is designed for us to learn this. So sometimes I think healing expands our understanding of family. We discover family is not only biological either. It can also be spiritual. That it can be intentional. We choose people that we want to interact with. And I know Joe and Sherri, we talk about this all the time. We are a work family, but we are way more than that. And we have chosen to, at this time, to be, and we told you, Purna, when we came to you for Reiki training, we could tell you are now a part of this family. You're a part of our soul family. So what does chosen family mean to you? What does that mean? Your chosen family.
Well, I think on the bigger scale, you really hit the nail on the head that we choose everything. I also agree, right? And, the yogic philosophy and many other philosophies across the world state that we're sitting around the table as souls in the, etheric astral world in that sense. And we have contracts, we have karmic to-dos. And I think sometimes the chosen family, the folks that hurt us the most, we have the most serious contracts with. Those are the folks that love us the most, that they signed that contract to take on the karma to teach us that really painful lesson. And so that's a bit of an inside out way of looking at the way we choose things, but we have agreed upon this contract. But then, like you said, right, beyond our biological family, because of certain experiences I didn't receive in my biological family, the more I connected with people, that I could receive those experiences of unconditional love, of healthy repair, of authentic belonging, where I felt seen and understood, where my nervous system can finally experience the connection that I longed for in my biological family. That is my chosen family. And I want to say on a personal note, because of the difficult week I've been having, you all have shown up for me in the most loving, gracious of ways that reflect to me what a true family unit of belonging and compassion and unconditional love is really about. That's chosen family.
And an honor. It's an honor.
Thank you.
I think a chosen family is just as important or valuable as your biological family, because it is something that you are actively choosing to make. Not trying to limit your biological family at all, right? Because it is super important, but this is the one that you get to, I don't want to say consciously make, because you're consciously making, I believe, your biological family before as well, but this is the one that you're making in this journey. So it is very important. I agree with everything that you said as well, Purna, and everything that Jeff said as we started this question. So I don't have a whole lot to add to this one. I guess it's just it is just very important to me. I have some very close people in my chosen family, as you all know. And it's not something that I make lightly. So it means a lot. It just means a lot. So
You'll know you are loved.
yeah, and chosen family, you are all loved just as much back. Just leave it there. So
Oh, wow. I don't think I've been so choked up. I just want to tell you guys, this has been like, oh my gosh, gotta get myself together here. Again, we're going back to Jeff's comment. I mean, before we, somewhere in the multiple lives we have, we've made a contract to come into this world, where we are, who we're with, who we meet out with. I think is all chosen before we even, in the beginning of time, as we're on to whatever version of life that we've made a contract with God with. All the people that engage or you interact with in your life are not there by chance. It's part of the journey. It's part of the contract. It's part of you being able to leverage the chains that you don't want to break, because they'll allow other generations beyond you to become much stronger and much more loving, and to be able to carry on the traditions that are very important, that I think forms life and people. And there are some chains that need to be broken, that we learn not only within the immediate family, that so happen by chance. You can't divorce your immediate family, right? That contract is there for you to learn, and you're going to continue to engage in that space until you get the lesson, which I think happens in life in general. When you don't get what it is that you're supposed to be received, you're just gonna, we talk about this all the time, you're just gonna keep being in that traffic. And so I think that happens, your intermediate family is by for sure, not by chance, it's by design. And your extended family is there by design as well. It's something that was already agreed upon. You're going to get enriched in your life in so many different ways, both in good, um, and then sometimes just in lessons. Because sometimes people are presented to us for seasons, for us to gain more wisdom and knowledge. So I think, as I continue on my journey in this, I want to embrace the areas where I feel like it's important for me to keep that chain, and I want to influence in areas where it's important that that chain gets broken. Um, and I want to do all that by providing an understanding of, you know, unconditional love and what that means to me, and that ultimately giving grace to people is how I get through that process. and to myself, providing grace for myself as well. And I'm running out of tissue, guys. I'm just like letting you know.
Well, you and I talk all the time, Sherri, about how, it's not chance. It's not by chance that we've come together, that our lives have intertwined, and we do come in the right time and in the right season. The universe's timing is perfect. It's perfect. It's hard for those of us that always want to be in control of everything and plan everything to say that. But the fact is the more I realize it and the more I allow it to happen, the more I understand that the universe loves us unconditionally. It does love us unconditionally. It does want everything for us. And it will give us exactly what we think and what we ask for because it loves us. And sometimes those are going to create very difficult lessons for us. I do believe that many of the relationships that we have with our chosen family outside of our natural family can also help us heal the relationships that we're struggling with within our natural family, because it gives us, again, a laboratory of opportunity to look and come up with solutions that we might not otherwise come up with. So let's bring this home. It's easy to talk about all this in theory, unity specifically. It's a lot harder to practice it with people. I know one of the things that, I truly believe we do create our own reality through our thoughts, through our words. But you have to recognize that the people around you are also creating reality with their thoughts and with their words, and they may be in contradiction or conflict with what you're, all right? And a lot of those people are your closest people, or your people in your family. And I always wonder, why is it that we are so willing to hurt the people in our family that love us so much? It seems like those are the people we so easily will hurt. Because I think, and Sherri, I think you touched on this a few weeks ago. A lot of that is because we know they love us, and that they'll love us even though we've hurt them. So, what does unity look like in a family, even if we don't have agreement all the time?
It certainly doesn't mean that everyone agrees or that we're conflict free, right? Like we were talking about earlier. And I think that unity in family creates space for every person to belong as they are authentically, without us projecting our belief in how they should show up. And it's going to rub shoulders oftentimes with the way I think, or the way I'm showing up. And so then, Rumi said, out between the ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field, and I will meet you there. For me, unity is that field. Out beyond the ideas and projections and beliefs and struggles and rights and wrongs, there is a middle ground, and unity exists in that middle space.
Sounds like the space between.
Ah, what a perfect segue. The space between, that's where we are.
That's where we are.
That's where I like to live. Yeah.
I agree. It's where we all need to strive to be. Not always easy to get there, but that's where we should always try to be.
So yeah, I mean, it's the space between. I mean, I think we just have to learn to give each other grace. I mean, there's no we're not going to get perfection where everybody's going to come with their own perspectives and we all are, but as long as we understand that, we understand that, and we gotta give each other grace. I think it allows us to exist in a more harmonized way in that space between. So,
Well, I go back to the Hermetic principle of as within, so without. To me, the family is the within. Within family, a lot of times what you'll see from people is a projection outward into society, into social situations that is a manifestation of what they're experiencing within, whether it's within themselves individually or within their family unit of which they're a part. And, so it's telling. My wife is a school teacher and she just finished her career Friday. And over 30 years of experience and dealing with children who come to school in that social environment, they, in so many cases, are expressing outwardly the difficulties that they're experiencing inwardly. She can always tell a child who has a very difficult home, very difficult situations that they deal with at home. You can't hide from that. But it also gives her then insight into what she can do to try to work and help that child and maybe provide, in some cases, what they're lacking. So they can then take that experience back to the family unit and hope that that might help them heal some generational wound or issue or circumstance. I mean, this is, the family is what we call the first circle. It's the first circle of love. And if we can get family right and healthy, this is why it bothers me so much that there is systematic attack on family. There's been a systematic attack to try to destroy the family unit. We see it not just in one part of our culture, but in all cultures. The family has been under attack because if you break the family, if you can loosen and break the bond of the family, you weaken everything around it. So as we bring this conversation to a close, perhaps the family isn't about creating a perfect family. If you find a perfect family, I'm going to call you a liar because I don't think they exist. But perhaps it's a lot more about creating more understanding, more compassion, more space between so that we can accept one another's humanity. And family is often the very first place we learn love. Sometimes it's where we're invited to learn it again. So, Purna, thank you so much, Joe, Sherri, for sharing in this conversation. This has been a beautiful conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. As I have goosebumps. I'm literally sitting here with goosebumps. And I hope that the people who will take the time to listen to this will have that same experience and feeling and that they will gain from it. So perhaps there's one relationship, one conversation, one act of compassion that's just waiting for you to break a chain. Because healing the world can be a lot closer than we think. It really starts at home. And with that, the space between continues. As we come to a close, remember that this journey continues in many expressions. This podcast is part of a family of partner podcasts. Awakening Heaven on Earth. The space between heaven and earth and Living Heaven on Earth are 3 companion podcasts exploring spiritual awakening from complementary perspectives. Awakening Heaven on Earth offers the core teachings and mystical reflections on unity, love, and conscious living. The space between creates room for dialogue, reflection, and lived conversation around those teachings. Living Heaven on Earth focuses on basic spiritual practices that help embody these insights in daily life. Together, they form a unified journey of understanding, experience, and integration, inviting listeners to remember their connection with the divine, with one another, and with the living world. You can find all of them available on the same podcast streaming platforms wherever you listen. And if music helps carry these teachings deeper into the heart, the Unity, Awakening Heaven on Earth album is available on all major music streaming services as a musical companion to this journey. Wherever you engage through listening, reflection, conversation, or music, may it gently remind you you are not separate. You belong to the one life, and heaven is already unfolding within you. Until next time, walk gently, love deeply, and embody heaven on earth.